Hello and welcome back. Hey, this screencast is talking about PBIS, which is something we are going to vote on in a couple weeks here. And I want to make sure paraprofessionals and support staff are aware of it because you have a voice too in whether or not this goes on in our school. So what exactly we're doing here, we are giving a little background on the foundations of PBIS and why we want a more systematic approach to behavior. Common language is something that I've heard a number of times is important, and common language and approach through each grade helps our kids with those transitions too. So I have a number of slides. I did not put this together myself. This is from PBIS Minnesota. So some of these slides I might skip through, but you can reference them if you are interested. So here we go. So what is PBIS? It's a process and not a curriculum. School-wide approach, proactive and preventative, individualized to the unique features of each school. In other words, it's not something that can be uniquely replicated at each school. It has to fit the school and the community of that school. It's team-based and data-driven. So what isn't it? It's not just prizes. It's not a packaged curriculum. It's not just a list of rules, and it's certainly not a one-shot training. To do PBIS right takes time. There's 2 years of training with your team before you get to the point where you really are a true PBIS school. So there's a lot of work involved, but there's a lot of good things about it. So a little bit about PBIS. In traditional discipline, the goal is to stop undesirable behavior through the use of primarily consequences, and its focus is on the student's problem behavior. PBIS is a little bit different than that. Its goal is to stop undesirable behavior by replacing with a new behavior or skill, maybe altering the environments, teaching appropriate skills, recognizing appropriate behavior. So it's not just consequences as part of it, but it's also looking at why is that behavior happening and trying to help teach new behaviors, which is something I think we all know, but this approach seems to help with that more. So how does PBIS work? It doesn't assume that students know the expectations and rules and appropriate ways to behave. It doesn't assume that students will learn appropriate behaviors quickly and effectively without practice and modeling. But they do assume that students will require instructional modalities to learn appropriate behavior. What does that mean? We need to teach expectations and rules and appropriate behaviors as effectively as we teach academic skills. In other words, we can't assume that kids come to school knowing how to behave. We really need to work at that, and that takes time and a lot of practice. So what is PBIS? What's it made of? There's really 3 main things that add to what our outcomes should be. Systems. What's our system in place? Looking at data to try to figure out things that need to be changed. And the practices. How are we teaching what we need to do? So we put in place practices of this is the expectations. We look at the data to see where that's working, where that's not, and we look across our whole school at in a whole systematic approach to make sure we're following through on what we need to do, and if it's not working, what do we need to do to change that? So you have that 3-headed stool. So a lot of things on this slide, but the big things to remember for me is that you have a school-wide language. And that there's clear, concise, measurable systems to address behavior errors. So just some different things to talk about here. And there's definitely a tiered system. So not everything works for everyone or is needed for everyone. So there's a tiered system. Systems, the way that we will teach and reinforce our expectations in each area. So we're looking in the classroom, the hallways, all of these different areas. And it helps support student behavior. We look at data. That's why we do behavior referrals. They call those ODRs, office discipline referrals. If we look at where they're taking place, when they're taking place, what areas, that helps us make decisions on looking at areas that need more support. So we really look at the data over time to see the areas that are working well and where can we keep working. Our practices, we want to support our student behavior, agreed upon strategies that all school staff will implement. So we're doing this all together. So We would try to come up with lesson plans for teaching, school-wide expectations. We would want to talk about how we're going to give feedback when correcting behavior. All of these different things here are things that we are doing as a school-wide approach, whether you're a teacher or a paraprofessional or another person within the school. So there's really 8 main essential features. I need leadership support, team-based approach, school-wide behavior expectations need to be defined, and we need to talk about how we teach our school-wide behavior expectations to our students. We want to acknowledge and reinforce appropriate behaviors, obviously monitor and correct behavioral errors, and make our decisions based on data, and make sure our family and community is part of the process, collaborating with us on all of this. That means sharing out what we're doing and including them in that process. So I've been really moving through this pretty quickly here, but what exactly does that mean for us right now? If we were to have PBIS and decide to go forward with that, there's typically about 8 members on the team. You can see the members here: principal, teachers, specialists, special ed. So there's a lot of different pieces here, and paraprofessional too. So we would get together and there would be trainings for us. We would bring that back and make collaborative decisions based upon what the needs are in our school as we set up PBIS. As I said, it takes time, but the people that would be on this team would be the leaders for that, but it would be working with our whole staff as we move forward too. So what does this PBIS team do? It meets monthly, it reviews data, it uses data-based decision making, all of these different pieces within here. And they're the ones that would also help with professional development for our building staff, because this isn't just something that you do. We want to make sure we do it right and train our staff on what this means as we move forward. Real quickly, this just shows the amount of schools that are part of PBIS, and you can see that it continues to grow. So one of the things that we do is we would come up as a school with some kind of matrix on the things that are important to us: respect, responsibility, safety, kindness could be those, and we have a big piece of that already happening in our school. One way to do that would be then to use those words and to show what that looks like in different areas. This is an example of a picture matrix of expectations at another school of pride in the bathroom. So this is what we would look for in the bathroom. That would be something that we would do in different areas of the school, and we have some of that already in the hallway and for out at recess. So some of this we're already doing, but it would be more systematic. This slide shows one of the things that we'll be doing is really defining what our problem behaviors are, how big a deal those are, and coming up with a plan for how to address those. So take a little bit of the guesswork out on what we need to do. There's always gray area, but this really helps minimize it and try to look at what we're doing and what's working. You probably have seen some kind of triangle like this before. It's sort of the iceberg approach, and it's talking about what works for most of our kids. About 80% of our kids are in the green tier, and that's the school-wide proactive approach to teaching what the expected behaviors are. It works for about 80% of our kids. We need something different for about 15% of our kids, and those are in the yellow. And then, of course, you have the red tier where you really have some specialized things that need to happen. And I'm not talking about special ed here. I'm just talking about some of our high-need kids. But that's sort of the approach with PBIS. It's looking at what works for the majority, teaching the behaviors for everyone, and then trying to come up systematically with approaches for those other kids, whether it's in yellow or red, that need more specialized support, given the resources that we have in our school. I think one thing I've already said is that we're doing a lot of PBIS things already. We are teaching our expectations. We have classrooms that have a student of the week or the month. We try to acknowledge positives. We practice, a lot of teachers are modeling and practicing expectations and role planning. We're using positive language. Rule creation, we try to let kids know what the expectations are. So it's not that we aren't doing these things, it's just, to me, putting it in a more systematic approach so that all of us know here's what we need in our school and here's what the expectations are, no matter where we are. Here's kind of a general sketch of implementation, classroom procedures. Obviously, things will look a little different in a kindergarten room as opposed to a fifth grade room, but we have some generalities that we can talk about across the whole school. Feedback and acknowledgement systems, those are things that are important. I'm just really going through some of these really fast. I talked a bit about the use of data with PBIS. They call those ODRs, Office Discipline Referrals, or student referrals. Some of the information is on here, and we do this through our quiet room, but that information really helps us target where our needs are and what's really working. So to me, that's a good thing. So just tying a few different things together as we move forward here. First off, PBIS and Responsive Classroom, they both fit together. Many schools tie those two things together. As you can see, there's a lot of overlap there. PBS and student-centered learning, it's clear and consistent, concise behavioral expectation. You're teaching and reteaching behavioral expectations, common language, which I keep talking about, and acknowledging the positives in all of us. There's a lot of positives that are happening. So next steps, why am I talking about this? What does this mean for all of us? What's happening? Next steps is I'll go back and I'm presenting this to the rest of the staff through this screencast. I'll go back with our teachers on January 10th to answer any more questions. Paraprofessionals, I know that next Monday we meet after school. That's a time that I can answer some questions too. At that point, we're going to take a vote after January 10th. If we have at least 80% that are in favor of PBIS, then I would put forth our application from our school to be part of PBIS Minnesota, and then we receive the training over the next 2 years to start becoming an official PBIS school. So I have to have that in by January 18th. What I'm asking you to do is to listen to this or tell your friends to listen to this at our school. Look through the PowerPoint. I went through a lot of things quickly. If there's questions that you have for me, make sure you ask them to me, either in person or through an email, because if we do go to PBIS, it's not just, this isn't something that just affects our teachers, it's something that affects all of us within the school, and we all have to be on board on that. So listen to this. If you need to listen to it more than once, ask me questions, but know that after January 10th, pretty quickly after that time, we'll take a vote, and if we pass that, then we'll move on to the next step of putting in our application to become an official PBIS school. So thanks for listening. I realize it's long, 13 minutes, but talk to me if you have any questions. Thank you.